Hello and welcome to Simon's Trading Channel. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope you've had a smashing start to the week. Thank you for joining me for another one of my videos. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. So, good news on this strategy of mine, which has worked pretty well. I'll show you historically. As of yesterday's closure, Bitcoin fired off, or the strategy fired off along for Bitcoin. So yes, I'm back in the game. And if you remember, what I do is combine this strategy with my other one, which is basically, so it's a bit confusing because I've got the same chart on both sides. But if I, on this chart, put on the weekly time frame, you can see this shows up. This divides, this is my way to divide into bear and bull, bear market, bull market. And so if the weekly time frame is still in the bull market, which it is, and that wick perfectly, pretty much perfectly hit the bottom, much like it did there, then I am waiting for a long signal on my daily time frame over here. And those two combined give good results. So yeah, nice to be back in a trade, and hopefully it's going to be a good one. Now, the good thing about having a trade strategy that you've back tested is that obviously you can use the data. And so you can see nicely here that it's picked out. You could long and short. I've just been longing because the weekly time frame has been in a long position, but you could have shorted. And actually, this last short trade on this daily time frame would have made about 6%. So, that's not to be sniffed at. I didn't enter that. I just waited for the next long, and it has occurred. So, based on the historical data, I don't know if I showed you this before, but if I go to the overview and then maximize the screen, so you can see here. If I just switch over to this exchange, because this is the one I back tested it on. Yeah, so you can see here that this blue line is if you bought and held, and the green line is the trade strategy. So you can see they're fairly equivalent. Now, that you might be asking yourself, well, why don't you just buy and hold? And that's a very good point. I want something a bit more objective, though, because you never know what the future holds. So I like to be trying to make my own. This just works for my mind, for my own psychology, where I don't want the slightly open-endedness of buying and holding. Now, I can appreciate that throughout Bitcoin's history, probably the best trade strategy so far is to be one of those people whom have bought and held. Of course, that's of course the origins of hodler. But for me personally, in my own psychology, I want something with some endpoints, and so I try and come up with strategies that get somewhere close to buying and holding, and you can see this one does. Now, what makes it more useful in a way is the trade analytics, and so you can see that for long trades, the average number of bars in a winning trade is 85, and the average number of bars overall is 46. Okay, and then the average number of bars in losing trades is 13. So the reason why that's useful is that I can now say, well, if this turns into a winning trade, then the average number of bars in a winning trade would be 83. The reason that's useful is that gives me a bit of a time spectrum. And so 83 basically takes this trade out to somewhere towards the middle of July. So, prime summertime. The average number per trade, of course, was, I think, 42. So that takes to the beginning of June. And it was 14 for trades that were unsuccessful. So that would be to the beginning of May. So what I can use then extrapolate from that data is if this is still long, basically by say the middle of May, it's very likely to be a successful trade and go on to the timelines that I said, i.e. the beginning of June towards the midpoint of July, somewhere around then. And then you can also extrapolate, well, where would price action likely achieve should that be the case? And you can see that the average winning trade in terms of percent is 56 and the average losing trade is 7. So let's say that this does indeed take 40 days, so that was the average. And if it's 50% from here, so we got 40-ish days for 50%. So that would take Bitcoin to a new high. I'm going to have to adjust my scale. 1 second. Just bear with me. Talk amongst yourselves. I didn't do that very smoothly, did I? So 50% from where it entered. Yeah, would take Bitcoin, basically up to somewhere around 130. I think my own personal expectations are a bit lower than that, but that just gives a rough idea. And, that would likely occur sometime over the summer. So that's why backtesting is useful, because you can then use the averages to give you a sort of spin on both length of time and indeed likelihood of percentage gains. So we'll certainly see how this all pans out, probably over the next number of weeks. Now, switching back to the asset assessment tool, I'm going to start with the lower time frame and work my way up to the weekly. Now, you can see that over the last few days, there has been volatility expansion to the upside. So basically since early hours yesterday, there has been volatility expansion to the upside on the 4-hour time frame. It's remained within the bull zone, and there isn't any bearish divergence yet. That will likely hit at some point though. Now the daily has also, depending on where today close is, will also likely, because it's just under 4 hours, will likely start to get volatility expansion to the upside. It's likely to also then create upside in momentum on the MACD, which it hasn't for some time. And you can see, depending on where today's closure occurs, if it's above basically 90K, which it's got a bit of a buffer for, we'll also enter the bull zone on the RSI on the daily time frame. So yes, still got to wait for the closure, but it's looking quite good, potentially for more upside following today's price action. Now, why that's relevant for then the weekly time frame is that you can see, and I've been banging on about this pivot for quite some time, that the midpoint of the Bollinger Band on the weekly is now around sort of 92-ish. And so a closure, so by the end of this week, it doesn't have to happen this week, but if Bitcoin did close above about 92K by the end of the week, that would put the weekly price action back above the midpoint of Bollinger. Now, that basically means that it's continuation of consolidation rather than an impulsive move to the downside, so a volatile downside move on a weekly time frame. So that's important because, much like the previous 1-2 consolidations for the bull run so far, at no point was there weekly volatility expansion to the downside. So it didn't happen here, it didn't happen here, and it hasn't happened yet here. When volatility, of course, did expand, so it expanded on this weekly closure, the price was already above the midpoint. And when volatility expanded, it expanded to the upside here, the price was already above the midpoint. So closing above the midpoint in a low volatility environment is a good indicator that if volatility is going to expand, the move will be to the upside. So yeah, interesting. Also, on these lows here, these weekly lows, the bear zone was never entered on the RSI here. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if the next move up, let's say there is some volatility expansion to the upside, maybe in the next few weeks, in line with my daily trade statistics. And if that did in fact occur and Bitcoin made a new all-time high, I would predict that the RSI will put in another lower high, and that would be two runs of bearish divergence from two lower highs on the RSI, starting with this one. So, two higher highs compared to this one on price action, with one and then potentially two lower highs on RSI. That's likely going to signal somewhere close to the end of the bull market. However, you don't know, right? This is all future guessing, and that's how it should be interpreted. This has still got time because the closure for the weekly time frame isn't for another 5 days, but you can see that as of this week so far, the MACD has turned green, so it's pointing back up, having got very close to that zero line again, but not closed below, and so not flipped momentum to the downside as I define it using the MACD, just like it did over here, just like it did here. But the week hasn't closed yet, so it does depend on what happens between now and on the perpetual exchanges, Sunday at midnight, on CME, Friday 9 p.m. UK time, something like that. I'm not quite sure what time it closes. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please like and subscribe, and join me next time for another Bitcoin price action analysis video. Take care and enjoy the rest of your week.